For this week's Touch Base and Solve, we've invited Professor Lisa Son, Faculty of Psychology at Barnard College, Columbia University in the US, to join us today. Her research lies in cognitive psychology and learning, and she has published books in Korea on the subject as well. Most recently, she wrote a book titled Impostor, which urges readers to not be afraid of showing their unmasked selves, despite any perceived flaws. I'm very glad to say that she has been able to find time to visit our studio today. Professor Son, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited.
Yes, it's so great to have you with us. Could we perhaps start by briefly talking about your background and how you got into your field? You joined Barnard College's Faculty of Psychology in 2002, I believe, and have been teaching areas including cognitive psychology, learning, and memory. Can you tell us more about what led you to study these areas?
Yeah, as usual, it was kind of accidental, probably. But since I was little, I liked the general area of psychology. I was Korean American, born and raised in America, and being a little bit different, being a minority, it makes you think about, what makes me different? What makes people think differently and learn differently? So I wasn't, I didn't have a direct goal of, I'm going to study learning and memory, when I get older. It was more, I just want to understand people. So as soon as I went to college, I knew that I wanted to do psychology, and I did just that. And then in college, I was sort of a neuroscience major, but after college, someone said to me, if you get your PhD, you get your college loans waived for a while. And I actually didn't really understand what a PhD was.
Right.
But I knew that, if you get your college loans waived for a while, that's a little bit kind of a burden eased.
Right, that's a nice benefit.
So, at the time, I was working in a lab. And I understood, there are PhD students there are postdocs there were undergraduates there. And I thought, this is what they do. They do research, and now I'm a part of it. And it was actually really exciting and interesting, although we were studying rat learning. And so it was a little bit different at the time. And so it was really my senior year when I decided, I'm going to study learning, but not rats.
Right.
Humans. And I also had an interest in teaching. And so it was sort of natural to go to graduate school. And that's what I did. I went to graduate school, and I just, life is a bunch of accidents sometimes. So accidentally, I met the greatest advisor in the world, who was studying not only human learning and memory and some cognitive neuroscience and brain sciences, but also something called metacognition. And it was then when I decided, I need to know what metacognition is, because I really don't know myself, and it's about knowing yourself. So I immediately started in graduate school, and that was 1995. And since then, I've been studying metacognition.
Right, and that is perhaps what you're best known for your research into metacognition. Can you explain for us a bit more? What is metacognition, and why were you interested in that field as well?
Metacognition is very simply knowing yourself. It's kind of a self-reflective mirror on your mind and your thoughts. In the kind of educational field, which is what I talk about a lot in Korea especially, it's really about knowing how to learn, learning how to learn. It's not just about getting a good grade or learning a particular concept. It's, regardless of the concept, how am I going to go about learning this particular topic? And so it's sort of philosophical in a sense, because it's about your own consciousness of yourself, but it's also very kind of relatable in the everyday. How am I going to learn this particular thing I don't yet know? In that sense also. And the reason I was so fascinated by it, there was two reasons. One was I didn't really know myself. I was more myself. The self isn't really important. What's important is making sure I do what I need to do to make others happy, to make others pleased. And then the second part of why I was so fascinated by it was I read a chapter in my advisor, Professor Janet Metcalfe's book on the tip of the tongue state. The tip of the tongue state is really interesting because it's like magic. The tip of the tongue state, or a TOT state, really says that you know what's in your mind without being able to say what's in your mind. Right? You when you're in the TOT state, you say to someone, "Oh, I know the name of the actor.
Sure.
I know it. You know it." And someone asks you, "Well, who is it?" And you say, "Well, I can't tell you, but I know that I know it."
Right.
So when I was reading about the TOT state, we all know what it is, and we've all experienced it. But this idea that how do we have access, this what's known as privileged access into our mind, when we can't even open it up? We can't retrieve that particular target.
Sure.
That was really fascinating to me on the kind of the scientific side of this, right? How do I know what's in my mind when I can't say it out loud? So it was those two things, the more kind of reflective, philosophical, who am I? And the kind of scientific, I want to study, how do you study the human mind? Those were the two reasons I really first got into metacognition.
And I understand it's from this work in metacognition that you came to work on your latest book called Impostor, looking at imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about this book then?
Yeah, so I originally wrote a book on metacognition. In Korean, it's called Mettains 학습법. It's kind of the learning of metacognition. And that was, I think, a good basic book for people to know about this concept and knowing yourself, and especially for parents and teachers to think about how to help children to learn, not only to learn. But I realized more and more that I didn't have very good metacognition often. And the reason for that was because I was an imposter.
Right. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what I mean is metacognition has two different processes. The first is known as monitoring. The second is known as control. When you monitor yourself, you might say to yourself something like, "Oh, I don't really understand what the teacher's saying right now. I'm a little behind." Once that monitor occurs, then you go into the control process, which is a selected behavior that helps you better learn, right? So in fact, for example, I might say during class, "Excuse me, teacher, let me raise my hand and say, I didn't quite get that. Can you please repeat it for me?" Or, "Is this what you mean?" That's the control process. But have I ever really raised my hand in school?
Right.
Not really, because I was wearing a mask of, I know it all. I have it all together. I'm just as smart as all of you. You know, in front of the teacher, I'm not going to show them that I don't know, or I'm not quite with it. So I realized when people were saying to me, "Oh, well, Lisa probably has great metacognition since she studies it," I actually had a barrier to this control process. And not only when I was a young student, but as an adult and as a professor. If I were in a meeting with other professors or other adults or other teachers, right, I might want to disagree or say something that is a little controversial or a little bit risky. And that's the good thing to do if I'm monitoring myself accurately.
Sure.
And to have a good conversation and a good brainstorming session. But what would happen is I would say to myself, "Ooh, someone might not like my idea."
Right.
Or I might embarrass myself.
Right.
Or this is too controversial. I don't think I can say it. I just want to be the obedient, kind, agreeable person that I usually am, especially as an Asian American in America, right? We have these stereotypes that I'm the obedient, quiet, agreeable person. That's an imposter. An imposter is someone who is pretending, playing on a role, or following stereotypes.
Right.
And because of that, I wasn't able to, accurately apply the metacognitive processes that were going on in my mind. Like, this is wrong, I disagree.
So it's a sort of feeling where you're constantly looking over your shoulder because you feel like you're perhaps not there at that level of perhaps other people around you, that you might be found out.
Yes.
That you aren't quite the person for a job or a position.
Yeah, I'm not quite the person other people think I am, or I'm not similar to the people around me. If you feel a little bit different or a little bit less smart, right? A little bit less kind of extroverted, you might find different ways to kind of fit in. And it could be to stay quiet.
Sure.
And to not use your metacognitive.
Sure.
knowledge.
And that feeling of insecurity, you feel it, but you really shouldn't. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's all kind of this illusion that everybody else is the same and I'm the odd one out. That's wrong. Actually, we all first of all, we all wear a mask.
Sure.
We all pretend a little bit that we have it all together, that we're just as smart as everyone else, and we have a right to be here just like everyone else in this position that we're at. But because we hide whatever kind of shortcomings we might have, we're under the impression that everyone else is better than we are, and we start feeling like we have to hide the insecurities.
Like your previous book on metacognition, this book is only available in Korean, I believe, and it's aimed at a Korean audience.
Yeah.
Is imposter syndrome something you found to be more acute in Korea?
Yeah, I don't have any real data on this.
Right.
But as a Korean American, and coming back and forth to Korea now for the past 10 years or so, I definitely think there is imposterism in America, everywhere, in fact. We all have to wear masks to some degree. But in Korea, I found that there are maybe more number of masks, right? There are a lot of different types of masks. Like, we can pretend to be smart, pretend to be the know-it-all. We can pretend to be cool. I've seen that a lot in America, right? I'm cool. I don't mind. Right? But in Korea, the masks that I've found most often are things like, I didn't even have to study, and I'm just naturally smart. This is what I call the genius mask. But then there's also the kind of humility mask. Like, I'm not really that good. I just, it was just luck. There's also this kind of mask that I see not only in Korea, but other Asian cultures.
Right.
And actually, that's been very bad in terms of being part of the society. And I gave a talk on this before, but I think often when I'm pretending to be more humble than I really am, is that helping at all? And I find that it doesn't help. So, for example, if someone gives me a compliment, I might say, it was just luck. That's actually the same as a genius mask. Luck doesn't mean anything. But instead, if I were to say honestly something like, thanks very much, but it was really difficult, and I found that I ran into these problems, but this is how I got over them. It actually helps the person who's interested in kind of the success that I've had, and being more open and honest about the kind of road to success, I think helps everybody, especially helping others take off the mask, right? If I just say, it was just luck, right? They're going to also think, oh gosh, I really have to get there by luck. And that's not actually possible.
You also said you look to apply your work into the education field in Korea as well. What's been the response been like to the book so far, and especially from perhaps parents you've been speaking to who are perhaps interested in this work for the education of their children?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty good. I think there have been a lot of people who've read Imposterism and have kind of seen some of my interviews and talks. And I know that it's very difficult. It's really difficult. There have been some people who've said to me, Lisa, you don't really truly know Korea.
Ooh,
you have to
right.
really wear the mask. You have to be quick, pretend you didn't study at all, pretend to be the genius, right? And I understand that. And so my message is always, because of the stress, especially that students feel and that a lot of children feel, it's actually really difficult to pretend to be a genius, right? At some point, especially when children get older, middle school, high school, it becomes very difficult to hide your effort. And so that's the message I keep trying to talk about, trying to give off is to parents and teachers is that even though kids might be very quick and really smart and get an A+ on all their exams, to kind of ask about, was it difficult? I know it was difficult. It was difficult for me, right? And to ask about, well, what are the things that you really loved about learning? This is all the kind of the road behind the mask. The mask is really the end product, right? The end result, like the grade, right? The success. That's a mask, and that's all we see. And that's why it's so easy for people to wear a mask. But in order to kind of decrease the stress that kids feel and students feel, if you kind of pay attention to the road to the success and the errors that were made before the success, then I think students will understand that, oh, these errors and this kind of slow process is nothing to hide, right? And that's really the message. And I think a lot of parents here are getting it.
Well, it's been really fascinating to look at this issue with you today, particularly at how it relates to Korea. I think a lot of people have a lot to reflect over. Once again, the book is called Impostor and is out now in Korea. In the meantime, I'm afraid we're going to have to end it here. We've been speaking to Professor Lee Son. Thank you once again for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.